Okay, go ahead.
Dr. Duran, you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now? Everyone's good? Thank you for joining us today. I just want to double check the sound and that everything's okay with that. We're good. Great. Thank you. So thank you for joining us today. It is an honor to be a facilitator and supporting Fighting the Good Fight. Thankful for Word and Deed Publishing Incorporated. And we're going to get started with our online book launch. So moving to the next slide. We are here to talk about Fighting the Good Fight, narratives of the African American principalship. We have multiple guests and our publisher on today, and we look forward to learning more about the story behind the stories within this amazing book. So thank you to Prosperity Educators and Carrier Instructional Leadership Consultants. So on the call today, if we can go to the next slide, I am Dr. Angelina Duran. I'm a principal. I'm in my 11th year as a principal. I am currently at Cherry Creek School District. Today we have some guests and we'll be talking more about each of our guests along the way, as we also answer many questions that were submitted to learn more about Fighting the Good Fight. So some of our guests are Dr. Vanzel Agosto, a professor at University of South Florida, Dr. Garen Gray, a principal at Highline Academy Northeast, Chi Kim, the CEO of Pure Edge Incorporated. Our editors are joining us as well, Dr. Isaac Carrier, who's a principal at GW Carver Indian Spring United Middle School, and also the CEO of Carrier Instructional and Leadership Consultants. We have Dr. Aaron J. Griffen, the VP of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at DSST Public Schools and CEO of Prosperity Educators, LLC. And our publisher, Dr. Darren Griffiths, Word and Deed Publishing Incorporated. We're excited to hear from each of you today about Fighting the Good Fight. Our agenda for this online book launch. So my virtual welcome. I am again honored to be a part of this esteemed book and Fighting the Good Fight as an administrator. I have worked in multiple schools throughout Colorado as a principal with a lot of accomplishments and exciting things that, you know, I am inspired by each of the administrators and authors within this book as well, that I continue to just encourage aspiring leaders. And I'm really honored and excited about. I want to also talk about, you know, introducing our publisher and editor and our introductions. So let's start with Dr. Isaac Carrier.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Duran. How is everyone today? Thank you for joining us. We are so excited for this book launch. It has been some time in the making. We can thank COVID for that, but sometimes it's good to slow down a little bit, and we didn't have a choice but to slow down a little bit. And so I think that also gave us an opportunity to make sure that everything that we wanted to accomplish with this book was done so very well. And that is hugely attributed to Dr. Darren Griffiths and Word and Deed Publishing. Dr. Griffiths is off screen right now, but he has been so instrumental, and Word and Deed has been so instrumental from the very start when Aaron and I, Dr. Griffin and I started having the conversation about this book and what we wanted to accomplish with it. Dr. Griffiths was just so instrumental in helping us kind of navigate the right paths so that we were able to tell the story that we really, really wanted to tell. This started as just a conversation between Dr. Griffen and I several years ago following my dissertation. And some of the things that came out of the dissertation and the challenges, the commonalities and the challenges for particularly African Americans in their road to the principalship. And our experiences certainly mirrored that as well. So we kicked around a lot of ideas and initially wanted, we didn't really know fully what we wanted. We wanted like 100 people to be part of it. And then, we knew that would become a challenge, but more than anything, we wanted the stories to be told, and we wanted it to be told from the voices of the people that live those experiences. We know that those experiences will continue. And had this been available to us, perhaps it would have been a little bit easier to navigate those avenues that we had to navigate as we became school leaders and ultimately district leaders as well. So I will certainly ask Dr. Griffen to chime in at any point and stop me from rambling because I have a tendency to do that. And don't you say anything, Aaron, because I know you were waiting. I just gave you a segue for which to, continue our regular banter.
Oh, it was coming. I was like, and you have rambled. You went over 15 seconds and we. So just to add to this, not much for me to add. Aaron Griffin, VP of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion in the SSD Public Schools. Not much to add, but we jumped into the concept just a bit that we were going to talk about. So I'm glad you did that, Dr. Carrier. We call him Chuck. Those of us close to him, so Chuck. And just to build on what he said was, we wanted unapologetic, unfiltered narratives. Usually when we get books on educational leadership, and especially from the Black perspective, Hispanic perspective, BIPOC, people of color perspective, Indigenous perspective, it's done through theoretical frameworks and conceptual frameworks. So what we did is we said, we're not going to put any frameworks on this. We're going to take the narratives as they are, unapologetic, unfiltered. And Dr. Darren Griffiths, our publisher, really pushed us in that because he was like, you said you wanted these unfiltered, unapologetic. Don't touch the narratives. As we were giving feedback, his push was us, don't touch the narratives. Your job is to accept it. If it fits the book, let it go. Our job is to copy edit. So he told us, do not touch the narratives because you said this was unapologetic and unfiltered. So we did not touch the narratives. We wanted stories in practice in real time. We wanted that trajectory, that ascension to and through the principalship, and also the struggle, as well as the recommendations for current and future educators. And just to close this out, we got 37 narratives of diverse experiences. And when we talk about diverse experiences, we're talking about a range of experiences across the assistant principalship, the principalship, high school, middle school, elementary, people who have transitioned out and upward to superintendent, people who are still in the role. That's the diverse experiences we captured. And 4 themes: a journey through triumph. And now we have a network of similarly experienced colleagues. 37 chapters, as one of our authors said, Mr. Kennard said, hey, I have 36 new friends now, because now we have a network of people who are recognizing they have the same backgrounds, the same experiences, the same struggles, the same triumphs. That we're not alone, as we've often felt to be. And then these are stories by practitioners for everyone. These folks, majority of the authors in this book, this was the first time they'd ever written for a publication. So this is their first time being published. And one of the things that Dr. Carey and I talked about is even in our trajectory, we didn't do a lot of writing outside of our doctoral program. So we like, what's going to happen when we offer and promote a space where our traditional non-scholars are able to write their experience. And as you get a copy of this book, I push you not only to look at the introduction, which is what we tend to do, read that afterward by Dr. Agosto, because Dr. Agosto alludes to that fact that many of us in this book are often hidden. We're behind the scenes. No one sees us. And part of that is because we do that, because we know once people know who we are, as Dr. Archie Blanson once told us in Aldine ISD, the higher you go up, the more people can get to you. So a lot of times we're hidden, we hide ourselves, especially those of us who are traditionally marginalized and minoritized. But this book is a book of vulnerability and courage, where people stepped behind the curtain and said, I'm going to tell you what it is and what my experience is. And I need this to be utilized by others to recognize what we can do better to reimagine educational leadership and education as a whole.
I want to add that one of the foundational, I guess, feelings that led to this whole effort was the fact that when you're in that struggle, when you're in that direction, it feels very, very lonely. You feel like you're the only one. And I remember distinctly going back and thinking, why is this happening to me? Why is this my situation? But when you start to speak with others, across the spectrum, it's a very similar experience. Maybe not the same circumstances, but a very similar experience. And so we also wanted this to encourage those that are in that struggle and understanding that there are many, many, many that have come before you, and certainly those that are currently in the struggle that have these experiences. And so we wanted that to also come out as well, because Dr. Blanson also said it's very lonely at the top, and that is true. You must be able and willing to stand firm on your own professional and personal values and principles, and stand firm in the work that needs to be done for our kids. And there's so many people across the country that's fighting for that. And I could not be prouder of how this book turned out. So I just wanted to add that additional piece as well.
Yeah. All right, Dr. Durant, take it. I'm ready to hear from our guests.
Yeah, thank you so much to Drs. Isaac Carrier and Dr. Aaron Griffen. It's amazing what you've done to put this all together. We're excited to then talk about our panelists and do our introductions from our panelists. So I'll call your name, and then if you can give us a quick highlight of your role and what you're currently doing now. So Dr. Ronzel Agosto, professor at University of South Florida. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be here and you all and talk more about this book. I did write the afterword for the book. I'm currently a professor at USF, University of South Florida, in educational leadership and policy studies. I'm currently the department chair of the larger 4 programs. And I focus my work around curriculum leadership, anti-oppressive education, and educational leadership. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to have you here, and we can't wait to hear more from you along the way. Next is Chi Kim, the CEO of Pure Edge.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chi Kim. I'm the CEO of Pure Edge, and we are a private operating foundation. And what we've been doing for the last 8 years is really sharing resources that we find compelling that will be helpful to sort of open people's hearts and minds. Prior to that, I was a school administrator for 15 years, a school teacher, and a coach. And I'm very excited to be here and honored to help with the book launch of Fighting the Good Fight.
Thank you so much. And next up is Dr. Garen Gray.
Hi, everyone. I'm Garen Gray. I am the principal of Highline Academy Public School in far northeast Denver, Colorado. And I recently completed a dissertation about white leadership in communities of color, and about how white racial framing impacts our ability to impacts white leaders' ability to do the work of building for equity in schools. We have 550 students at our elementary school, and it is one of the more diverse schools in Denver. And we face a lot of work in trying to show all of our students that school is for them, and in trying to help our teachers to understand how school does or does not serve the needs of students from a variety of backgrounds. And so I'm ongoing in this work to build for the success of all of our students, and really excited about this book as an important way to look at the work of educational leadership.
Thank you, Dr. Gray. And I echo that. It is definitely amazing to see the different lessons and learning from others, from their narratives as well. So we are honored to have you as panelists. I'm going to be facilitating each question, just alternating, starting with Dr. Augusto. So let's see the first question. So the first question, who is this book for? And what is its potential impact on educational leadership or leadership in general?
Yeah, so I think someone alluded to that earlier, that this book is for all audiences. Anyone who really wants to understand what the practice looks like in schools. And I said in an earlier work that I co-authored with someone where we were looking at research focused on Black women principals. And within that work, it was disappointing to me to see the lack of practical experience, application experience that would give readers a sense of what actually happens in the lives of administrators from day to day. It was a lot about their own experience, but not tapping into the leadership experience. And so when I came to this book, and was asked to write the afterword, I had that in mind. And that's what I saw in the book, was filling this gap for people who are trying to understand what leadership looks like day to day. And not apart from theory, that's not what I mean. I do mean that the theory is in the practice, and you have to be able to theorize the practice or see the theory that is guiding what people do. It's not just random, any day, everything goes. But I think that's one of sort of the issues as well, is that there's still that split between theory and practice, where either you're getting one or the other. And we're helping students in leadership preparation learn theory, not necessarily learn from the theory that's already happening, that's already being practiced, because that's where we get our theory. We theorize about the practice. We don't just make it up in academia. It should be grounded in the research of people doing the work. And so this book can really help students learn about practice and being able to see the theory in the practice and not see it as something just for those who do academic work, or not only for researchers, but the way that theory is already there, and help them not put theory as something outside of what African-American principals do. So I think I'll stop there and let someone else, if others are going to take that question.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Acosta. I appreciate that. We're going to go to the next question for Ms. Kim. So what are some immediate takeaways you have from the book in your own practice and development?
Super interesting question, because I don't work at a school site, but we work with site administrators and school districts and state agencies. And one of my most immediate sort of takeaways when I've read all the stories is just the humanity of the work. That it actually, if you take the title out of the book and you actually just read the stories, what drew me is that it's actually just the narrative, the humanity of each of the administrators, what that role is really like. And the struggles. And I think even if you just peel away the layers and we focus on the sort of the human aspect of leadership, it's that and the relationship building that takes for leaders to really be great administrators on site, so this level of trust. And I think just the thread throughout all of the narratives in the book are really about what it takes from the heart and head to be connected, to be able to sort of dive into the work, but really stay grounded in why they're there and what I think, just being present and being the model of just thoughtfulness, intellectual capability, as well as, extreme heart and excellence. I'm not cheering squad. That's great.
Thank you so much. So with that same question, I'm going to have each of our panelists answer that question as well. So Dr. Gray, what are your thoughts on either the first question and or second one? Who's this book for and the potential impact? And what are some immediate takeaways you have from the book in your own practice and development?
Yeah, I think to start with that first question, I really do agree that this book is for everyone. Um, I I have really appreciated as I've read through, kind of walking or feeling a sense of partnership with the writers in the book, and their pathways to leadership, through leadership, and their experiences that they have. And within that, I think this book really, for folks who care about systemic injustice and who care about making change within in school systems, this book is kind of an entry point to that change. When we look at the whole system and we look at the number of years that the system has been functioning to marginalize individuals who are not white, and then we can read these experiences, and instead of being overwhelmed by the power of the system and how pernicious it is at reasserting itself, generation after generation, instead we can see that this is an entry point. And when I read these stories of the leaders, I see in them a fellow traveler on this path, and I also can learn from them about the ways that they have overcome their challenges, and the ways that they have thought very differently from the way that I think, and the ways that they have moved their schools in different ways than I have been able to think to move my school. So I think that is both illuminates that it's for everyone, and also that's a takeaway, is that when we lead with a sense of mission, when we lead with a sense of purpose, that we can align those purposes, even though our stories may be different, even though our backgrounds may not be the same, and that purpose unites us. And I think this book really seeks or serves to show that really clearly.
Thank you, Dr. Gray. Absolutely. Dr. Agosto, do you have anything to add to that second question of what are some immediate takeaways you have from the book in your own practice and development?
Yeah, there are two sort of areas I was thinking about. And one is the focus on turnaround leadership. And so part of what the literature says on turnaround leadership is a focus, or we should be focusing on competencies. What is it that people are able to do in order to turn schools around, to improve their instructional outcomes, for instance? And one of the areas, or one of the things that we do in our practice when we work with school districts, is to have cohorts identify, along with the districts, participants who can enter our programs and who would likely work in schools needing to be turned around. And so part of our interview process is asking them to tell stories about their practice and tell us about a time when X, Y, and Z, whatever. So we're asking them to talk about their experience so we can try to perceive or interpret the competencies around different areas, and we use that to score them. And one of the problems that I've seen with some people, that they're not able to tell a narrative in which they are giving you detail about their practice and telling it in a story-like form so that you can follow them, almost like you're in the room with them. And that's the interview process. It's saying, tell me about a time when so-and-so, when you had to sort of work with a lot of data at once and pull it together and make a decision. Tell me about that time. Tell me about the people in the room. Tell me how you felt and what you thought. And not everyone finds that an easy process to do. They will talk about things and leave themselves out of the stories. And so when I read this, I thought, this is what we're trying to get at. This is what we're asking. And the people who have been able to do this well score high on our admissions rating score. And with that, we have had a more diverse group than historically what was coming out of the district of participants who've been scoring high and then going into schools to do turnaround leadership work. So that's one of the sort of big leadership area discussions that I see this taps into, helping us to diversify the pool and change our processes for recruitment. Another area I think is culturally relevant leadership. And we have a course on culturally relevant leadership, and we ask people to tap into their ancestral knowledge, their cultural knowledge, and talk about that in connection to practice. And that's also been a challenge for students. They'll talk about one thing, and the other thing but not together. It's hard for them to fuse it or to even recognize that they have cultural repertoire. They have cultural tools that they bring with them that can help them in their roles as they develop into administrators. And so I see this book would be very helpful for them to be able to see, here are references to elder knowledge, ancestral knowledge that inform how they do the practice. So those are two very immediate things that we're doing within our programs that students tend to struggle with. And I think this book can be useful in both of those efforts.
Thank you, Dr. Agosto, and all of our panelists. Very powerful, absolutely. And I agree, as a practitioner and a principal in, boots on the ground with this, those narratives create those partnerships and understanding that humanity piece is a big part. Caring about making the change is what I'm hearing. And so being change agents in the field within those systems, and the cultural relevancy piece, absolutely. So we're going to move to the next slide with questions. And I'll start with Ms. Kim on this question. Where would this book fit in professional development for staff, school systems, higher education, current and future leaders, from your perspective, Ms. Kim?
Thank you for that. You can call me Chi. I feel like I'm back in school when you call me Miss Kim.
Okay, thank you, Chi.
One of the things I feel like it's so important, I think when young administrators are, coming into the system, they want to have a specific sort of aura about them for, because they're going to be leading. They've got teachers. One thing that I think is so important to remind new leaders in particular in staff development is it's actually the story. When you connect to someone's heart, that's actually how you get them to buy into whatever thing that you're going to, approach them with, or whatever initiative that has to be launched. There's two things about the principalship that I think are so important, is that you are seen by the educators in your building as the leader, but you're also seen by your families and your community as the leader. And there's this very, nuanced dynamic of very stellar administrators, and it's that heart connection. And when you start to think about how you develop narratives, how you tell stories of the school, how you tell stories of individual students, or just stories in general about how important, a family can be to the fabric of a school, that is probably one of the most important lessons they do not teach you in administrator school. They teach you a lot of stuff, but they don't teach you how to connect to the heart. And I think that's one huge value of this book. And the way that I got connected to this book, I'm just going to show, because Aaron expects me to show the book all the time. The one reason I got connected to the book is because we have a relationship with one of the authors, Kennard Branch, who happens to be this incredible principal in DC public schools. And it was his narrative that we got captured with. It captured our hearts, and we wanted to make sure that we shared that story. And then from that, we have another principal out in New York City Public Schools, Dr. Dawn Brooks DaCosta, who her whole school at T-Malls is all about the ancestors, her own, just finding Black beauty in everything that they do, in the arts and the music. And I think that part for me is when you can capture someone's heart, even if you don't, maybe you disagree, but when you capture someone's heart, that narrative is so strong that it's hard to not support it. So that's what I would say, that this book is really important for that.
Absolutely. You're speaking to me, and that's my leadership motto completely. You have to connect and have that heart and have that grit to overcome. And there's so many stories embedded throughout each of these narratives. So thank you for that. I'd love to hear from Dr. Gray on the same question. Where would this book fit in from your perspective in professional development with your staff, school systems, higher education, and current and future leaders, or you as a leader as well?
Thank you. Yes. I started off my career as a middle school writing teacher, and I taught writing for almost 10 years in different grades. And but one of the things that's kind of a cliche of teaching writing is telling kids not to tell, but to show what is going on in the story. And I think, to me, this book is really not a telling book. It is not telling you, take these 5 steps and you will suddenly be a better leader, or you will suddenly be serving your students better. It is a show book. It is a book that is showing what the power of the journeys of African American leaders are, and to show that these stories are important and that these stories are essential to building better systems for kids and building better schools that really do meet the needs of the communities in which they sit. And I think that really connects with what both of the other panelists have talked about in terms of sharing heart, and in terms of sharing our own journeys with the communities in which we lead. And I think in reality, a lot of schools, as we know, are, by population, a lot of schools have a lot of white teachers, and the students are generally not a majority white students in public schools. And so having teachers start to think about how their heart leads to their work and how they can show the communities, the children, that they have love for them, that their experiences are valuable, and that there is a place for them in education and in their learning, and that their stories are an important part of their learning, and bring those stories to the forefront. That is a way to build stronger schools for kids. And I think this book is an example of that. That we see leaders in this book who understand that on a very deep level, and who understand how all of their experiences have led them to be the kinds of leaders that they are, and have led them to be the kinds of people that they are. And these are the kinds of people that need to be leading in schools if we want to move the needle for our younger children and for up and coming. So.
Thank you, Dr. Gray. And Dr. Agosto, what could you add to that question?
Yeah, I'm thinking about the practicum experience that we have, where we have someone who's like a supervisor who helps go to schools, where you have practicing administrators working with some of our students who are learning to be administrators. And in their role as coaches, they're asked to try to listen to what is happening in that context, to take the context into consideration, and to be this active listener and to give constructive feedback. But realistically, not everyone values the personal narrative. There's a knowledge power hierarchy that happens in our society, where personal narratives are not always privileged, because they're like subjective. It's from your experience. And we teach in schools, a lot of what we teach and ask administrators to do deals with objective knowledge. So use rubrics, use scoring systems, use observation checklists, use test scores, to make this a more sort of impersonal, a distant relationship to the person in the practice. So I can really see using this book with our practicum, with our supervisors, and asking them to say, pay attention to these stories. Look for what's happening within the stories. Ask the stories, see if you can have the people you're working with tell the stories, and then recognize the value in those stories, not just go directly to what are the test scores and what are the ratings and things like that. So I think that has to be taught. On the one hand, it has to be taught. The other hand, it's also a value system. It's a value system that some of us still hold on to, that privileges some types of knowledge and not other types of knowledge. And so I can see this being used to further professional development of those who are entering the profession.
And if I can add also, I really appreciate that, Dr. Agosto, that perspective, because I also think that this is really a book that could be really useful in building a community of knowledge, and really having folks read it and then talk about it. And I think that becomes a really important aspect, is that these stories, if they're just read in isolation and one person walks away saying that this is what I learned, that's wonderful. However, if the stories are read and become a conversation, and become okay, what do we see here? How can we apply that to our reality on the ground, to what our community needs, to what our school is working toward? That can create a lot more power, and it takes it takes the work of leadership out of the hands of the de facto school leader, and it gives it to the community that's using the stories here to increase their knowledge and to move forward together.
Can I just add some data as we're talking about this narrative piece, right? So if you've got just the most recent data from principals across the countries, white are 67.7%, Hispanic Latino are 13.7, Black or African American 11.5, Asian 4.6, and then American Indian Native Americans is 0.6. This is administrators across the country. When we think about that, and then we think about turnover of teachers, predominantly teachers of color are turning over in communities. What I think the book really does well is actually tell the narrative what the the African American principal's story is, but there's a whole layer of background that got that later to the position that they did. And it actually is another way of trying to figure out, how does all this data play out, and what does it really feel like in a school setting and system. And we also know all the data is very accurate about if a teacher looks like me, I'm much more likely to be successful, right? If a leader looks like me as a teacher, I'm going to be much more likely to be successful. And when Aaron and I first met, he said, we're in spaces often where we're the only ones, right? We've got that look across the room. And, I don't see very many of me in these rooms. Aaron said he didn't see very of him in the room, but we can see each other as leaders of color as well. And so I think that's part of maybe the dynamic that I wanted to just throw in there, that we can balance out really what Dr. Agosta is saying, about all of the checklists and things that we are all, accustomed to in school districts, but really trying to figure out how, what's the nuance of really trying to dig deep of what does it mean to actually know someone, see them for who they are as a leader, and then sort of dig back, like, what do we have to do to make sure that our students are seeing this profound, modeling in the field as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's a wonderful discussion and such a good point. And I can echo that in so many different ways. And I think that loops back to the title of Fighting the Good Fight. And here's my book. So, I think it's on Blur, but Fighting the Good Fight, it's definitely sometimes to see some patterns throughout these narratives of people fighting, and not necessarily a fight, right? Like in a boxing ring, it's a fight of grit and resiliency, and showing that, my heart is in this so much that I matter and I want to make a difference. And so there's so many different stories that, and I love the twists at the end of many of the narratives that bring it back full circle to optimism and enthusiasm of fighting that fight and saying, hey, I got here and so can you, right? So, don't give up on yourself, give yourself grace. So many different pieces of the puzzle that connect with that. And there's a good flow within the order of the narratives from my perspective, just kind of gently easing into, going into some more deep system rooted types of discussions, but so many different angles and learning from this. So excellent job to everyone who was a part of this. Our next question: why should folks get a copy of this book? Dr. Gray, why should folks get a copy of this book?
I mean, mostly because Dr. Griffen keeps emailing you every couple days to ask you to get more copies. So, I think we've talked a lot about the ways that this book is impactful, and the ways that this book can be used for working with teachers, working with leaders, and I think a big part of the reason why this book is impactful, and the reason why people should get this book, is because it's a perspective that's not seen enough. It's a perspective that is not out there in education schools enough. This is not a book that I read coming up and taking all of my coursework. It's not a book that African American leaders have read coming up and taking their coursework. And it is a book that tells the stories that really need to be told if we want to realize public education for all children. And for myself, and thinking about the current state of our country and education, educators are exhausted right now, and I can speak from very personal experience of that, and just also seeing in the media right now, that these are the stories that are being told, is how tired we are, and there's a really strong tendency in our country when we are tired, or when we are challenged, and for us to fall back on the things that are traditional, or the things that quote unquote worked in the past. Well, that too often, and that almost always in education, means systems that support white learning and white children to be successful. And so in this time when we are tired, it's even more important to reiterate and to realize that going back to that, or going to those comfortable ways, is not appropriate and will not serve our children, and will not serve our education systems. And so this book is actually, it brings that energy. Dr. Duran, you mentioned the twists at the end towards hopefulness and continuing to fight, and this book really, for myself in reading it, it really woke up for me some of those foundational reasons that pushed me toward education in the first place in my life, and some of the things that when I'm stuck in my day-to-day world of working through behaviors and teacher behaviors and the nuts and bolts of school leadership, I can move away from. But this regrounds me in the importance of those individual stories and those individual struggles, and helps me to see that I have to continue to move forward in my beliefs and in my purpose that I have in school leadership. And so I think in that sense, this is really important for this time in particular. And it's really important for leaders who are setting out on their journey to see these stories as well, so that they can see themselves represented in the fabric of public education in this country.
Thank you, Dr. Gray. Well said. Dr. Augusto, why should folks get a copy of this book?
Yeah, it goes back to, I think we were saying, who is the book for earlier, the book being for everyone or everybody. And then when I think about that, I think sometimes we lose sight of particular people or groups if we just say everybody. So I want to think about African Americans specifically. And so some of this goes back to the data that Chi shared earlier about the representation. And so I would say, given those figures, we might say that African Americans are underrepresented in educational leadership across the ranks of administration and schools. But I would also add to that, they're undistributed. And so they may be clustered in different spaces and not in all schools, in all districts, in all urban or rural suburban contexts. And so with that, I think the narratives, the book itself provides a glimpse for African American aspiring administrators to see what's ahead of them. I think for many people who are African American, who think that when they go to the next level, whatever that is, that they're going to escape racism because they've advanced to the next point. But I don't think that is the reality of life in America. And so instead of thinking you're going to escape it, think about what it looks like, how it operates, and how some people circumnavigate that as they still rise in the profession.
Thank you, Dr. Augusto. So true. Chi, why should folks get a copy of this book?
Yeah, Dr. Augusto, I just wanted, that resonates with me so deeply right now, watching just the Supreme Court hearings. And I think it doesn't matter what level you get to, right? If there is not a deep understanding of the work that it takes to get to a certain level of any, aspirational goal of, someplace, I think why you should get this book. I do agree that it's hopeful if you are an African-American educator who wants to continue the path, just knowing that you're not alone. I think that's number one. Number two, I think why you should get this book is that if you don't start reading and educating ourselves about people's experience and what they have to struggle through to get to a certain place, we're not going to get anywhere. And I think for me personally, what I loved about the book is it was it was hopeful in the way that you can not feel alone. And I think for any, piece right now, I think just personally, I think just with the Asian American experience and all the Asian hate that's out, Black Lives Matter movements, all the things that we are sort of dealing with just in society actually impacts every aspect of school communities. And it's that piece. If we don't know and we don't pay attention to the context in which we are serving, we're going to feel weighted down. We're going to feel like nothing's going to change. And it's just those moments and glimmers of hope where your heart has to be connected with other human beings. We have to focus on our humanity. And that's the only way we're really going to get out of the funk that we're in. So I would say, who should buy this book? Anyone who's interested in just learning more. Curiosity always helps. And then really just wanting a deep connection to make sure that we survive as a society, as a community. And if it starts with a story, I think that's where we begin.
Excellent job. I agree. There's so many different components within this book that I've already referenced certain chapters and components as I mentor aspiring leaders that I talk to, or different teachers that are in a crossroads right now of figuring out what they want to do. So there's a lot of messages within here that resonate, I think, for all leaders and educators and African Americans and so many others. Being a Latina leader, there's so many different things that I'm inspired by these stories, because there are a lot of parallels in experiences, and just going whoof, and then not feeling alone, right? That's also powerful, of going, wow, it wasn't just me that experienced that or saw others that had to overcome. And we have to band together and work together to continue to help each other go up that mountain, regardless, right? Humanity, all of us educational leaders serve a purpose to meet our students, families, and communities. And so this has a strong impact. I would buy this book too, because, now is my opportunity to highlight Dr. Teresa Lance is also, in this amazing, good fight as well. And I had the honor to have her as one of my leaders above me as an assistant superintendent. And I learned so much from her and her leadership, and mainly her heart. And it goes back to those partnerships and having heart and working through it. And like Dr. Agosto has her book there. See, we're all representing our books, so this is good. Yeah. So we all recommend that you check it out. And we do have one more question before we find out what might be next and look ahead and hear more from some of our other guests on here. So what was left unsaid that you would like to add or share? Let's start with Chi on this one. What was left unsaid that you would like to add or share?
I think right now, maybe I'm just feeling ultra hopeful and sensitive. I feel like there should be a piece about women in leadership, and then women of color in leadership. When you think about the majority of the teachers in our systems that are women, but then you look at the number of leaders and the percentage of women in the leadership roles. And this last turnover of superintendents in the country, all of the replacements, the majority of those leadership turnover replacements of superintendents happen to be male. And so, just thinking about that and how we can sort of change that narrative. So I would just put that on the table for folks to consider as you think about your next book.
Thank you. Dr. Agosto?
Yeah, this might be also for the next book. I think, and maybe someone alluded to this earlier, but more opportunities for people to come together. So collective narratives, shared narratives. Most of these were single authored pieces. So what happens when we have sort of triads or dyads or pairings of people doing collective or shared narratives?
And Dr. Gray?
Yeah, I think for mentoring of young leaders, I think that this book really is so important, and I think that as you referred to, Dr. Duran, you had an influential leader who's highlighted in this book, and I really think that that when we build stronger leaders, African American leaders in our school systems, that really inspires more and more people of all ages, whether they are 4-year-olds in ECE classrooms, or high school students, or teachers, or aspiring school leaders. And so I think this book is so important because it shows that breadth of experience, and that the importance of having strong African American leadership on all of those levels. So I just, I'm also in this place right now. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a really great new book idea. There's another book. So I'm sure Dr. Griffin, Dr. Carrier, you guys are taking notes, getting ready to keep writing. I'm also thinking about my own experience of mentorship with Dr. Griffin. And he he was never afraid to ask me questions that I had no idea how to answer. And he would let me kind of talk myself into a circle, and then he would ask me one more question. I would just be like, damn it, yep, I just did it again. And so I think that mentorship experience is reflected in the narratives that are told here as well. And he really brought in my perspective. And I think that, in our current reality, where there are so many, as Chi referred to, there are so many white leaders, that those white leaders need to have African American leaders who are mentoring them and helping them to broaden their perspective, because even if they want to make change, they are very likely to stumble in trying to make that change. And that doesn't mean that they should be giving up on that. And these stories continue to show that journey needs to be ongoing, and that it can happen at all levels of experience.
Thank you, panelists. Absolutely. And I'd like to add and chime in what I think was left unsaid, or I'd like to hear in addition. I'm very student-centered and student-focused. I always go back there whenever I need to get regrounded or help people remember our purpose and our why. But I'd love to see something from students' perspectives of leaders and teachers of color that had an impact on their school experience. I know, being a Latina leader, we're in that small percentage range as well as our African American leaders and Asian Americans and Indigenous as well. When I walk down the hallway or know that there's a student that looks like me and can relate, and the look in their eyes that they just light up and they know. I've had an honor when I worked with Dr. Lance, as well as a few other African American leaders that were very inspirational to me. Students, African American students would just be in awe. They would just be like, who is that in a suit, right? And, they cared about me and they talked to me, and I want to be like them. And so I think I would love to hear, student perspectives from all ages, just to kind of add into the fighting the good fight, because that's a big part of the why. So thank you to our panelists, Dr. Agoso, Chi, Dr. Gray, amazing reflections. We really appreciate your time today and your contribution to this work. So now we're going to look ahead. Word and Deed Publishing Incorporated. We're going to kind of see what might be next, a message from our publisher.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I'd like to thank our editors and Doctors Carrier and Griffen. And Dr. Carrier spoke of how often we met beforehand. And the key component was we need to challenge the status quo. And what is the status quo? The status quo favors someone who looks like me from my economic background and with some of my more ascribed characteristics. So when we thought about it, we said, how do we make sure we determine whose voices are going to be included? Because we know with systemic processes that filter down to individualized practice, unless we provide counter narratives and challenging them, we can talk all we want, we're not going to see anything. So I'm honored to have worked with both authors and both editors as we work through that. Their passion. They taught me things through sharing their experiences that changed me and as a principal for over 20 years in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I wish I had talked to them 20 years ago. I probably would, I know I would have been better at my job. The second thing is I want to thank our contributors. It takes courage to share experiences in a system that doesn't value the sharing of experiences that run counter to the dominant narrative. It takes courage. And thank you, because your narratives are going to support our learning. Now, Word and Deed Publications and Publishing is a social justice and equity publisher in Canada. We only choose books that are going to challenge and question that status quo. We're not interested in, we're more interested in the qualitative data and a mixture of qualitative, quantitative, as opposed to quantitative only, because the quantitative data allows for issues of equity and social justice to be put in the background. And it allows us to justify practices that are more borrowed from business, which do not have any context with making our world better. So we're going to make more efficient. So when I hear these words efficiency, you know what, if my hair wasn't already gray or white, it would go whiter. We need to challenge that. We need to question who's involved in our decision making. Whose voices are we hearing from? I teach at University of Toronto with leadership courses as well. I'll be using your book. And so whose voices count, not only in this book, but in your school? So when we think about how can we use this book as a school principal, we first need to change ourselves. We need to reflect on that. And as I mentioned earlier to Dr. Carey and Griffen, your experiences and your sharing with them have made me a better person, but also certainly a better administrator and university teacher. So you as a school principal now, you're getting this information. And we talk about inclusion. And inclusive leadership is not about weakening the broth, so to speak. I use that analogy when I'm working with. I come from a critical social justice lens. So what do I mean by that? I mean that whose voices are at the table in decision making? And if we don't have those voices there, how are we going to incorporate them? And then you as that school principal must, after you've completed your own learning and are on your journey somewhere, knowing it will never end, like Neo from the Matrix, who took that pill and was woken up to the world he never saw. That was me 25 years ago. So how do we as school principals build that in so when they transfer us from 3 or 4 years, that we can use our influence to get others to join us on that journey? And they understand white supremacy. They understand white fragility. They understand for the necessity of culturally responsive pedagogy and teaching and leadership. They understand for the power of narratives, and not just from the principal or the teachers. We go back to our classrooms and we talk to our students. And the other point I'd like to add before we go is I like practice. So the courses that I teach is, I guess because I'm older, I've got fake ID now that says I'm younger. Theory is wonderful. So what are you going to do tomorrow? So that's the question I have for the principals I work with. That's the question I have for the teachers I have in my class. So we've got our learning here. What step are you going to take tomorrow for yourself and for the folks that you're working with? Because there must be an onus and a responsibility that we have actions. And you say, well, it's so much. Okay, well, let's talk about your first step. And one of your first steps is going to be, how do I continue along that journey? And now I must make sure that I'm working with my staff, because as school leader, your biggest influence is not the students, it's your staff. So these are the key components, and that's why I'm very proud not to call these, they even allow me to call them by their first name now. After a year and a half, they wouldn't allow me. I had to call them doctor. They would correct me, especially Aaron. This is the key. So when we're looking at that, how do we involve it into our schools? And as the school leader, democracy in school leadership is often goes against issues of equity and social justice. We're not voting on whether we're going to take this step to address the needs of our students. So this is where that awareness at our school leadership level is critical, so that you have the strength and the power to stand up and to withstand the negative reactions you're going to get and the resistance, but to stay strong for our students and to envision what kind of hope and what kind of world do we want for our students. And this is what this book can do. But it must be structured into a school's learning. Too often, school leadership and school training is a one-off. A one-off in Canada is, we're going to get our equity classroom, we're going to get our equity thing for 1 month, and then we move on. So how do we embed our narratives? How could we embed this book into our learning, in our learning, ongoing staff learning? So these are the questions that we must structure. And it's not, it's invitational, but this is where I strongly believe that school leaders must be more directional in terms of saying, we're going to have our group together to guide us in making that decision. But this is a thou shalt as we move ahead. We're making a commitment to it as a school. We're going to embed it into our learning with reading or writing or whatever. And to stay the course as we're moving more towards the neoliberal practices that will push issues of equity and social justice to the side and squeeze our school leaders even more from preventing them to have the strength and the courage to maintain the great work. So sorry, long-winded. Dr. Carers, I want to thank you both for teaching me. You're 25 years too late for me, but maybe I'll be a better university instructor. We need to get the book out. If folks want to get a copy, and we have had Chi, your organization, fantastic. Thank you for believing in the book and using it. There are significant discounts. Amazon is the basic way to get it, but for large numbers, we'll give you significant discounts. As a small publisher, we're more interested in getting the message out and having books make a difference than me driving a better car than a Hyundai 2014 Accent. Anyways, have I covered everything, Aaron? Because Aaron's going to scold me if I don't get it right today.
Thank you, Dr. Griffiths. Yeah, that was excellent. I think he's giving you kudos non-verbally over there on the screen.
Wait a minute. Why? God, you and Chuck. See, I got friends on this call too, just FYI. I mean, y'all just coming for me. And this is live, and there's some people on YouTube and stuff like, yep. Come on now.
It's all good. It's all good. All in fun, right? We're going to loop back to a look ahead for fighting the good fight and hear from Dr. Carey and Dr. Griffen. Let us know.
Well, I can just, we've been getting a lot of feedback. I can tell you, I know when Dr. Carey and I connect every now and then, about every couple of weeks, we connect via phone call, middle of the week, or sometimes on Saturday or Sundays. And we're getting a lot of feedback via email, Twitter, multiple places where people are like, what's part two? We need a part two. I know Dr. Carey's been asked to do one for superintendents because there's nothing like this for superintendents where they tell that story. We have gotten the feedback. Thank y'all for affirming the feedback about women in leadership. We've gotten that feedback. Dr. Carey and I talked about possibly a workbook to go along with this so people can use it, not just as a conversational piece, but as a working piece so they can hold in their hands. So love that feedback. That's what's coming next. I know that Dr. Carrier is already planning, and you can speak more to this. He's already planning a physical book launch down in Waco or Houston. I know folks are asking for that. So go ahead, Chuck, and add to what I shared.
Yeah, so we have gotten quite a bit of feedback, and I want to thank everyone that's participated in this virtual book launch because, I had to actually fight back a little bit, a few tears, because this is very, very near and dear to our hearts. And some of the perspectives, actually all of the perspectives that were shared today, could not verbalize that throughout this process. And so I'm thankful that I wasn't able to speak a whole lot because it wasn't about that. It's about what this book has meant and what future work is going, how that's going to guide the direction of future work. Dr. Duran, when you were speaking earlier about just the limited number, I started thinking about just Texas alone and how many school districts we have and how many female school district leaders we have and how many of those are African-American females. I think at this point we may have 6 in the whole state of Texas, and I happen to know most of them personally. So it's certainly a topic that needs to expand. I love the idea of including the voices of our children. All of us that have been doing this for a while, the greatest compliment that you can get is when you run into one of your former students and they share what you meant to them and what your efforts meant to them. And that is just I think a culmination of all of the things that we've talked about, the purpose for this book and actually the multifaceted purpose for this book. And so we do have, we've already started at least the initial conversations about what the next steps are going to be. As Aaron stated, we do, even as a result of this, he and I were messaging back and forth about the potential of a workbook, because we want this to be able to be utilized in as varied ways as possible. So this is certainly the start of hopefully something even greater to come. And I want to thank all of you for your participation and advancement of our work and the work of those that contributed. It has been an amazing event. We'll be planning I'm currently planning 2 face-to-face book signings, one here in Houston where I reside, and also one in Waco where I work. And I'm looking forward to a great experience. There's a lot of people excited about this work, and I'm happy that I was chosen to be a part of it.
One final thing. Darren, you did miss something. Yeah, it did. Yeah, got it. I was trying to figure out what can I get them on. Yeah. Hey, y'all, this is just what we do in our talks. We go at each other. It doesn't matter who's in the room. This is just what we do. One of the things that Darren has been pushing Dr. Karen and I about is those reviews. As you order books and as you read them, please go to Amazon and leave reviews, videos, and pictures. Several of you have done a great job of that. We're trying to get 100 reviews by the close of the summer, by August, if we can. So please, as you're getting these books, as you're reading them, as you get them out to colleagues, and people have a copy, tell them to just log in. It takes about 2 minutes. Leave a nice positive review, leave some words. We're trying to get to 100 because that's pretty powerful on Amazon. So that's all I wanted to add. So Darren, you're right. Yeah, I got you.
Well, excellent work, Dr. Carrier and Dr. Griffen. This has been amazing to be a part of. We also have a slide of where do we get our copies that might be valuable to repost as well. So wordindeedpublishing.com, amazon.com, prosperityeducators.com as well. And again, thank you so much to our panelists, Dr. Augusto, Chi, Dr. Gray, for all your work and contribution. So I believe that concludes our book opening virtual event today. And again, it's been an honor. So thank you so much. And everyone, get one and gift one. It is definitely worth your time to read and learn from the different narratives. And kudos and great job to all of the brave leaders who put their narratives out there too. I recognize that is does take a lot of courage, but they did an excellent job. And Dr. Carrier and Dr. Griffen, you did an excellent job of guiding them and helping them script that. So my hat's off to you. I am appreciative of the work, and keep fighting the good fight. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Are we still live or are we down?
Still live, hold on. Okay, you're down.